So we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order.
Or continuing.
So this is January 13th, 2026. This is the Volunteer Fire Department Ad-Hoc Committee. And with that, Mr. Harris, will you say our invocation, please?
All right. Heavenly Father, Lord, we just come to you, Lord, giving you all the praise, honor, and glory, Lord. Thank you, Lord, for this day. Thank you, Lord, for this county. Thank you, Lord, for bringing us here, Lord, to try to come up with solutions to help the volunteer fire department. We pray, Heavenly Father, Lord, you just guide and direct us. Pray, Lord, that all things that we do may be pleasing unto you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right. Let's see. All right, so I know we've got Mr. Williams is on his way. He's going to be late. Chief Bush had a family emergency come up, so he's not going to be able to join us this evening. And then Chief Edward Eggerton is out of town on business. So just know that Mr. Williams will be joining us here shortly, and I would assume Mr. Klein as well. I've not heard from him. But before we approve the agenda, I want to make a couple or one edit here. On number 7, item B, review budget line items for equipment. That was something I did not put on there. I checked with our chairman of Health and Human Services, and he didn't request that either. So we're going to strike that because that is not an item that we have anything to discuss on. So just remove that from your agenda. And so with that, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nope. All right, passed unanimous. All right, approval of the minutes from December 9th.
So moved.
So second?
Second.
All right, so any discussion there?
Mr. Chairman, I'll be abstaining. I was not here at the last meeting, so
Fair enough.
I'll be voting on
All right, well with that, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Mr. Harris is abstaining. Thank you. All right, recognition of the public. No one signed up. Anybody care to speak? No? Okay, so no one recognized from the public. Old business. So this was funding ideas for VFDs. This is something we tabled until January of 26. It is now January of 26. I would entertain a motion to continue to leave this in old business, and then when we're ready to start to actually discussing funding ideas, we'll just pick it up.
that. So moved.
Second.
All right. Any discussion on that? Nope. All right, so all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nope. All right, so that passed unanimous. Okay, brings us to new business, so study session. So what we want to talk about this evening, and we want to dig in more on, is our staffing. So that was one thing that we had some good discussion on last month, and we came to the determination that a 10 and 10 was a good metrics to try to establish to get to a baseline. I had some conversations with Chief Egerton. He had been working to get those that numbers to us. Unfortunately, was not able to complete that. But with that in mind, and just so we can keep our conversation moving ahead, I put together some stuff just this afternoon, and they're in the printouts here. And these are just, call it creative math, or just some different formulas that you could possibly use to back into what a staffing need could be. Again, this will just be directional, but it is using data points that we already have, such as total population, number of houses, and then with 2024 call volumes, that's a full annual number that we actually had data on. So using those 3 data points and just using 2 different methodologies to try to back into that, you can kind of see across, if we look at this one, we'll call it item 1. It's got a few different things, such as population per house. That's a very simple calculation. Just you're taking the number of houses divided by the population. So, with that simple math, you can see it's about average about two people per home. There's also a demand index. That's taking a percent of population and then also of the homes, heavily weighted more on EMS response with the population number as opposed to like a structure or fire response with the 10%. So it's a 90-10 weighting on that, population versus homes. That I felt like aligned pretty closely to the data we did have in our CTAS report. where it did show that our actual fire-related responses were somewhere around 11%. So just keeping with that, again, this is directional, so I felt 90-10 was probably a fairly accurate, or at least a directional guesstimate as far as call volume goes and call type breakout. So with the heavier being more on emergency type response, medical, if you will. And then you get into an estimated annual first alarm responses. Those align fairly closely. Again, those are, I don't know if I have that actual calculation on this. It looks like I missed that. I apologize.
80 times the demand index.
There you go. So yeah, there it is. 80 times demand index. So that's just kind of a bearing that it came pretty close to the total call volume. So that may be a little high on some of these, and it could be low on some of these. But again, it's just directional, which then that was able to get us to a rostered member available to respond. So taking a 20% of the total rostered members. Those numbers did come from Mr. Edgerton, and Mr. Williams was able to help fill in some blanks as well today to get us to where if we had 20% of our total rostered volunteers were available to respond at any given time, what would that look like? And so that's those numbers reflect. And then you get over into a minimum active roster ratio. And so that's essentially a ratio, that number to one volunteer is what you would need or available to respond. You'd have to have, for instance, like for Cottontown, with this formula, you'd need 3.8 volunteers rostered to have one ready to respond in that 20%. Does that make sense? Yeah, so anyway, long and short, we get down to the very last one, the minimum active roster to achieve the 10 and 10. And this is just more or less like a across the board, based off of the planning availability factor, we'll call it. So just using the typical, that 20% times that 10 is what we actually desire. I'm sorry, divided by the 10 will get us to that minimum active roster of 50. So if we could target 50 volunteers per station, that's what this is telling you. But when we look at that and we start to look at what our current rostered members are, you can see that to get there, we would need to, on average, be 2 to 3 times our volunteer numbers. So that's a pretty big jump, you know. So for this, I think the key insight for me whenever I got through looking at this was that we either one have to really get to volunteering to 2x and 3x that total number today. To get to where we feel like we would need based on these formulas to have adequate coverage, or we have to come up with some other solution besides just growing the volunteer numbers. So I'll stop talking and let you guys get any questions.
If you could just refresh my
Yeah.
memory, what were we trying to? What is the 10 and 10?
I don't want to get this wrong, but it's how 10 people in 10 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's NFPA 1720.
Okay, but that's based on structure fire,
Yes,
right?
structure fire response.
Didn't you say that this was slanted more toward EMS calls?
A portion of that, I think it's the demand index. Yep, the demand index was
It's based on homes.
more EMS, standpoint towards more EMS. So
Okay.
even if this was half right, we would still have a large.
Okay, I see it. All right.
Number
10 and 10,
to recruit.
suburban area, 500 to 1,000. Okay.
Yep, yep.
Now, in my calculations here, that I went through a number of the sources of information, and that's one of the things that I've figured out is that there's so many different places to get some of this information. Some of the population data I got from a form called, let me find my form here. Nonprofit report, some sort of a report that the departments had to put together every year. Sumner County policy. Anyway, my point being, there was some information that was not necessarily available. Some of it I could tell by looking at it that it was either misinterpreted or they had taken some sort of a guess. And then, you know, we are getting data, we've got some from the comptroller's office. And then we also have some information that was in the packets that came from Santa Clara County GIS service, as far as square miles, things like that. None of those jive 100%, right? There's some spikes and loops in there. Bottom line is, in putting all this data together, it just appears to me that every one of our volunteer fire departments fits within the rural area category, not the suburban, which would then call for 6 people in 14 minutes for a structure fire. The point being, I'm not here to debate the minutia of the data. But because there's so many different sources for the data, it shows that there's a lack of a central collection point and verification for some of the data. But, you know, if my calculations are correct, then the 10 and 10 that we want to try to achieve is overshooting what 1720 says is required for a structure fire. I have no idea what I just accomplished, if I accomplished anything.
That's up to each department. I just threw out the 10 and 10, just
Yeah.
as the middle of the road, and each department has to tell us, this is what we're trying to achieve based off this metric.
Now, the 10 and 10, 6 and 14, whatever, is that from that department, or is that total firefighters? Take, for example, and I was trying to get the report from all the times and stuff, and the big fire Highland had the first of the year for the barn fire. But I know, you know, they posted, Highland was there, Oak Grove, I think Westmoreland, you got, Portland was out there. So does that number count as only from those that are primarily dispatched, or does that include mutual aid? How's that?
That accuse mutual aid. How many people can you get there in that time frame? Can you meet those minimums?
So it doesn't matter if it comes from Oak Grove, Highland, or Portland, as long as they get 6 people there, then they, okay.
That's what you're looking for.
The 1720 allows mutual aid as part of
Yeah.
the calculation.
Now, I'll muddy up the waters. ISO is looking at that individual department.
Right.
Okay, and that's what I was getting
That's
at.
where ISO will look at that individual department.
That's-
You can count mutual aid, but you have to have a minimum for ISO standards.
So that's what I was looking at, was, because you know where I live, right outside the city of Portland. So, you know, if my house catches fire, Highland's dispatched, Oak Grove's dispatched, and Portland's dispatched, you get 4 from Portland, 4 from Highland, and 3 from Oak Grove. By ISO, I got 4 firefighters, and the other 7, or whatever it was I said, was all mutual aid. But otherwise, as long as they were all there within 14 minutes, they met 1720, but ISO says only 4 showed up initially, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Does ISO use historical data to figure out, to confirm that a minimum number of firefighters arrived? Or are they just looking at staffing and saying, okay, you have X amount on the roster, so theoretically, within this 5-mile radius, you should be able to get X amount on the scene?
I'll tell you, from a career department standpoint, they look at how many people you have on
Okay.
duty.
All right.
But then as far as on scene, they pull your last 20 structured fires.
Ah.
And then you have to show, these are the apparatus, these are the
Mhm.
personnel. And then they dive into the FPA, or they hear in this amount of time, yes, no. And then it either helps you out or it does not.
Okay. And does ISO hold volunteer departments to that same standard?
We would have to ask some of these gentlemen. out
Yes?
here.
Motion to suspend the rules.
There's a motion, a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Yes, ISO holds volunteers to that standard as well as combination departments. You have to look no farther than Cross Plains and what they're going through currently. But ISO requires you to have so many firefighters on scene from your department. Or you can have 24 of everybody else, but if you're not there covering your own place, then your ISO rating will go up.
Okay. Do they then look at dispatch records?
Yes. They look at your fire records, see how many you've had on, like Chief Thornton said, past 20 structure fires. And they pull up your data to see. And for those who don't have staffing, that's all they can rely on. Now, it also, I will say this, it can be your department, or from the department. So if your department is 7 stations, and you've got 2 people coming from each, you get your number. If you're 1 station, then you've got to get that amount of people from that 1 station.
Apologize for my tardiness. Were we discussing about the 4
ISO.
minimum for ISO?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the reason I asked that question, and I believe I mentioned this in our last meeting, I'll consider it anecdotal as I haven't looked into it in depth myself, but I'm anecdotally have been told that, and I've shown some examples of inaccurate time data in the dispatch records. One of the records that I saw showed 911 call taking time, and then dispatch time and travel time, and I believe under control time, all as the same time. There wasn't a 1 minute difference between all those times. And that's an official record. That's what my understanding is, that the volunteer firefighters have access to that for their report writing. So question that I have in my mind is, if we're looking at historical data to verify ISO standards, and we're not putting accurate dispatch times into the record, where's it gonna come from?
They will ask if that comes up, if you have that in your report. Okay, this building wasn't on fire, so let's, and you'll have to pull the recording and then get the actual timestamps.
Oh,
And so,
Okay.
yeah, and they don't necessarily have as much time, but what I would love for everyone to do is, if you see that, it's just a matter of emailing dispatch, hey, these times can't be right, or looking through the CAD for that call and just see, because usually later on you can find it on scene time. Okay, for whatever reason, sometimes it's a lot of the APIs, just for whatever reason, when they pull the information, it just pop, everything.
How often is that happening, do you think?
Well, I have no idea. I've seen a couple of examples.
Every day, all the time. Yeah.
You gotta think, Chief, correct me, how many fire dispatchers do they got? One, ain't it? Yeah.
That's what I was gonna
So
say.
you got one person sitting down there, so they may have the ability, when tanker 103 checks on scene, to type tanker 103 on scene, but then they forget to click that little button that says 103 on scene, or so that's what it means when you go back through those notes and you find that timestamp, and that's,
Yeah.
I've done it many times where you've had to sit there and dig through a page of stuff just to get your times, to get those accurate.
But that information is available to the volunteers, they can go to?
After a call, we get an email with the incident, and it has times on it. It has, doesn't have call receive time, but it has the time. You got one of those?
I do somewhere.
It'll have the time that the call is set up in 911, the time that it's dispatched, and then
En route, on scene?
And then it starts with, if I check en route on the radio to the station, and I get logged in with an en route time, and then when I get to the hall and check en route with an apparatus, they log that apparatus in with the en route time. And then it will go, check, that apparatus will have on scene and then available. And then at the end, there's an overall time that the whole incident's closed out.
Does it
Now
mark
that-
each individual truck?
That closeout time, though, if there's other agencies involved, like EMS or the sheriff, it's gonna be based on the last agency but
And
for
you're
my
saying-
department, when we're back in service, we'll have a time there.
And you're saying this happens quite often?
Oh, the call he was talking about with the barn fire up in
Have they give you a reason why?
lack of dispatchers and lack of training.
They have one fire dispatcher for EMS and fire most days. So if they get super busy, sometimes they can pull one. But if you look at the police side, there's probably
And
6 and
supervisor
7.
will step in.
But there's one lady or man who dispatches all fire, all EMS, all day.
We have
So it's-
begged for a dedicated dispatcher on like a structure fire, large structure fire, and it doesn't happen. They don't have the staffing to support.
So, I knew we had dedicated dispatchers for fire and EMS. So you're saying that that's their excuse because they only had one fire dispatch, right? Or none at all? Is that what you're saying?
One on shift at a
There's
time.
one.
They don't have enough dispatchers.
Currently, I know they're going through a hiring process now.
Yeah.
If they receive, a couple
We're always
more.
going.
But,
I still don't think they added another fire dispatcher.
well, they added 7, I think, this year.
Yeah, none of them were fire.
Anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Okay, the only reason I bring that up is that as we get further into this, we're gonna be looking at the need to evaluate empirical data. And we need to know if we're all using the same sets of data, so that we can all get to the same, hopefully the right conclusion.
Gotcha, so let's come back into session. All right, so, Henry, thank you for that. So, to help us stay on the same page and use the same data, that was one reason why I was like, hey, let's just, I will distribute out. And so what was included on the maps that were sent out was the population data. That's from the Tennessee Comptroller's Office. It's broke down by fire district. And so it's on each map. I also too included a breakdown. It's in the handout here. First 2 columns. I think it was in the, it's also in the agenda packet too. Or it should have been in the agenda packet. That information as well, so I apologize, I think it's made it in there. But, so that, we'll definitely need to make sure we're all using the same information, because, yeah, I don't know how many times I've been on a project where this person's using this, and then you gotta go back and try to do the forensics to figure out who's got the right numbers.
Well, and just as an example, I can tell you that the population that I compiled from the Comptroller's Office differs from the census data.
Yeah. So one thing that the census data I don't think will do is break it out by fire district. So that may be what you're seeing is, unless I'm missing it and I just.
No, I think the only place I was able to get census data was for the cities.
Okay.
And that data differs from the comptrollers. Not by a tremendous amount, but census data for Hendersonville says it's 64,404. Comptroller says it's 61,800. Goodlettsville census says it's almost 17,600. Comptroller says it's 6,413.
It's split between.
Doesn't say that may be
counties.
2 counties,
Mm-hmm.
because Goodlettsville sits on a county line.
Well, then let's move it.
Let's not open that up.
We won't solve that in this, this committee, so. Yeah, we'll stay focused on, getting to a funding recommendation, so. Okay, so as far as from a staffing requirements, and I'll put it, I am no expert in staffing in fire needs, so I'm gonna rely heavily on those who have experience in that area. What I put together, it seems to me, was based on 10 and 10. If we want to go back and revise and do 6 and 14, it definitely looks like some stations are in better shape than others, but I don't know that, like, recruiting our way out of a staffing need is probably it's like it's going to be the most realistic option, if that makes any sense.
Well, I think one of the factors in the data itself, the staffing data, you're gonna have to take into account the time of day. Because during the day, it's going to be more difficult for these volunteer firefighters to leave work and come. I don't know if holidays make any difference, but I know that time of day is going to vastly complicate the staffing numbers.
Definitely will, and I think that could be a next thing that we need to start peeling back. But as far as total rostered members, are we all in agreement that we need more than what we'll be able to recruit for, or? Yeah, and again, I mean, like just going off of a 10 and 10, which we
Yeah.
agreed last time, we're at 2 to 3x the total number for all but one station. And I think White House is in the best position.
Well, and I think as I was researching today, it seemed to me that the pay per call that White House and Westmoreland do, that has been a tremendous factor in them being able to keep personnel better than the rest of the departments.
Okay. So with that, if we're all in agreement that it's volunteer recruitment is not the way that can be part of it, but it can't be the whole solution, then let's shift our discussion towards what would be, help us kind of close the gap there.
I think one thing, especially as far as the ISO component, because several insurance companies still run off of that matrix, and that's going to be a big factor as far as what affects the general population, is do we keep like we are now with the 9 districts or with 8 departments or however you want to work that, or do we go to a county fire service, which allows you, I think one of the chiefs had said, if you get some from here and some from here, it doesn't matter, it's still all from the same department at that point.
Yeah.
So you go from whatever this number comes up to is 250 to 300 firefighters on your department versus 13.
I think it's definitely an option that we can definitely look at as far as bringing it all under one umbrella, and then have obviously the different stations underneath that. I'm struggling with that because I don't have data that says that's the next best move, right? So I think it would be a little preemptive just to jump there. But I do think that is something that we may end up leading towards and getting to. I don't, just in what research I was doing, I think we need to talk a little bit about, so we've got all volunteer, then you got combination. And so let's shift to the combination discussion and what that could look like if we had more of a combination, because it sounds like there's only 2 stations now that is like would be a combination.
2 departments.
2 departments that are a combination.
Well, who's White House?
White House Community and Westmoreland are the only ones that have any full-time staff.
And they have.
And that's only one
But
daytime staff.
But
for each
Westmoreland's
one.
they're volunteer city too, are they not?
Yeah, they are partially city, but if you look at, say, like their population area, in comparison to the other volunteer, they much more align with what the volunteer has underneath of their umbrella compared to what, like, say, a Portland City would. What did Portland City have, like 16,000 was the next smallest town? Westmoreland is at 5,800. Shackle Island has 10,000 people underneath their umbrella, twice as much as Westmoreland. So, I mean, I know they are technically a city department, but also if you look at the map of Westmoreland that they printed out, you can see that as far as actual Westmoreland that they're covering, it's a very small aspect compared to their total zone coverage. They cover quite a bit of the county outside of their city limits. Now, I'm not saying that maybe it shouldn't be switched as the Ad-Hoc committee had done in the past, try to break it down more evenly as opposed to all the departments or all stations getting the same amount. But I do feel like Westmoreland needs to be included in those discussions, if for no other reason than the county area they cover. 'Cause if we were to try to do a volunteer department to cover that area outside of Westmoreland city limits, we'd end up having to make a whole new fire station right there. And it's a lot more cost effective to give us a little bit of money to Westmoreland to cover it than it is to add a new station, fire truck and all.
But the chief, I'm gonna say, you've got probably the most experience out of everybody as far as the combination, so I'll divest to you on explaining how that would look in this regard.
Well, a lot of it depends on which direction you would want to go. Are we talking about 24-hour shifts, or are we talking about identifying this is the heaviest call volume when we don't have people responding? So is that 8-hour days, 12-hour days?
Yeah, I don't know, Curtis, do you know, obviously White House, Westmoreland, they have that one daytime person, do you know that?
I know White House was at 8 to 5. In fact,
Westmoreland is as well.
Brad originally, before he was the fire chief of Millersville, he was the training officer for White House, and he worked that 8 to 5 Monday through Friday shift. So I know it helped quite a bit on their response. Also, the way that Robertson County funds their fire departments is they do it on a per call basis. So every time, say, 51 misses a medical call or a fire call, they actually get paid per call through the county. So it's more productive for them to make sure they have somebody 8 to 5 Monday through Friday to respond to those calls than it is to lose out on that funding.
So the responder doesn't get that pay?
No, the department
department's
itself.
funding.
Yeah, the Robertson County just switched that this last year.
And Westmoreland has that as well?
Yes, Westmoreland has a daytime. I talked to Chief Jenkins today just to confirm it.
They have, what, two?
One.
He said he only has one right now.
One
They're
full-time.
trying to get it
So
in the
he's not
budget.
counting himself when he's not at Gallatin, right?
Right.
Okay. So,
Well, I guess he has
Most of
somebody
the
that's
time he
covering
has
that
two.
shift besides him.
yeah, most of the time, yeah, I think he is too.
So that pay per call, is that coming from the city of Westmoreland and then Robertson County? For White
No,
House?
for City of Westmoreland, it's coming from the City of Westmoreland itself.
I was trying to, like, I didn't state my question clearly. So the pay per call, who's paying for the pay per call?
The City of Westmoreland.
Okay, and they pay that to the Westmoreland Volunteer Fire Department?
Right. Well,
The responders, because they're all.
it's a city department. It's not a separate entity that the city donates money to the Westmoreland Volunteer. You look at their budget, it's their city budget they turn in
They'll
every
be
year.
considered part-time city employees, and then whatever they have chosen as their pay metric, so whether it is, if it's $15 per call, or if they're doing $12.50 per hour, minimum of 1 hour.
So theirs would be different than, is White House pay per call, Robertson County pays or White House?
Robertson donates it to White House Volunteer. They actually got a SAFER grant about 4 years ago in order for them to do pay-per-call for a 3-year period. And part of that grant was that they would continue to do that after the SAFER grant was over with. Now, Robertson County also increased their funding to be able to do that. This past year, I think it went from, they were doing about $260 per year, and this last year it went up to $330,000 that department gets from Robertson County. So until a year and a half ago, their funding was closer to about $270,000 from Robertson for one station, and then Sumner was given $48,000 total for 2 stations.
So how does the pay per call, that's what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, I think it's-
Is that pay per call, how's that working for Robertson and White House?
Seems like they're happy, but I will say Brad could answer that question
So
very well.
Robertson just donates the money to White House, correct? And the
Right,
White
yeah,
House-
they do a nonprofit
White House
donation the
community
same
just
way.
pays it to the guys based off of whatever calls. And I'm
Okay.
assuming they have a cap that they will hit in order to keep within their budgetary guidelines.
Yeah, now, my understanding is that the way they have it done is they figure out how many calls they're gonna have in a year. Of course, they can kind of get an idea of that, add 5% or so year over year. They only, I think it's 2 people, whoever the first 2 that check en route for a medical call, I think that's how they do it. They don't want like 8 people showing up on a medical call, everybody trying to get paid. There's not anything like that. I believe it's first 2 check en route to a medical, and then on a fire scene, it's just a certain amount, and it's not even hourly. Actually, the way that they have it done, there's a TCA code or a comptroller policy to where as long as it's not a certain dollar amount, they can still be considered volunteers. Because it's literally just enough to pay for like their fuel and a little bit of their truck insurance. That kind of, it's like $15 per call.
I can't remember what the
So,
term is, but yeah, Montgomery County did it off of a point-based system. Every call you responded to was a point. At the end of the year, they divided the total number of points based off of the pot, and that's how much your call ended up being worth. And everybody got 1 check at the very end.
Okay.
Am I right, Brad, is it the first two on the medical call?
Give or take.
Okay.
Depends on the call, but yeah.
Okay.
But as far as personnel staffing, that's worked tremendously well for them. I mean, even if you look at their roster amount compared to the other departments, and I don't think they miss, there's not a lot of calls they miss from that department.
So So I think what we're venturing into here is a discussion of different funding models. The pay-per-call is a funding model that's very common, particularly in some of the volunteer departments in larger municipal areas back east. Paid on-call is another funding model, probably similar to what White House is doing, or paying somebody to be on call, even if it's just one person, to staff this particular vehicle at this station for 8 hours. That's paid on call. So that's a funding model that can be looked at as well.
Okay. Yeah, we don't have, I guess, recent data to show us. We've got what's in the CTAS report from like 2018 as far as that breakdown of call times. And I don't know if that's just too old to look at, or if the trends would stay the same. I mean, I don't have any point of reference really to be able to say I wouldn't feel comfortable saying that that's good, but.
It would be my opinion that the call volume data and the types of calls would need to be updated. I think the recommendations made in the report, particularly in the executive summary, I think would carry through regardless of call volume. As I think a lot of it is just based on expected growth, and you know, a firefighter would look at that and say, okay, well, that makes sense, that's common sense. But I think some of the recommendations that they make for establishing some sort of a countywide coordinating authority, and then, you know, the developing models below that would apply regardless of the call volume data. Sumner County is going to continue to grow. I don't see any trend that call volume is going to decrease. It's going to continue to increase.
Yeah, we're definitely not getting smaller. I mean, as much as the county tries to slow the growth down, it's you can only do so much, and people still are moving here by the droves.
Yeah.
And these call numbers, especially with the cities not growing outside their city limits as much as what everyone was expecting, as much as they are getting out, they're not taking the zone, and we've got an obligation to cover it. We've got to do something. We can't just leave them people to where they don't have adequate fire coverage. I met with the fire chief of Rutherford County today. He said back in 2008, when they first got a fire coordinator, they were about where we are now. They were about 180,000 total population. A little bit above 50,000 of that was outside of city limits. Within 10 years now, they're 400,000 citizens, and they're at 115 full-time firefighters, where they started out 2008, they were 0. He said the best thing that he could tell us was the biggest mistake they had made was they allowed their volunteer departments to deteriorate to a point that they didn't have a choice but to have a countywide fire department because there wasn't enough response. He said the best leg up that he could tell us compared to what they've had to deal with is if you look at the cost of full-time staffing, whatever you can do to keep the volunteers in there compared to what it's going to cost to have a full-time department that's going to be able to respond to the number of calls we're going to have here in the next 5 to 10 years. If you don't support these volunteer fire departments right now and do something to get them some of the trucks and maybe do some of the part-time staffing or whatever you can do to stave off the full-time, it's going to be a world of difference if we have to make that jump.
Yeah, that was, thank you for sharing that. I had, just in some of the research that I was doing today, was just looking through, and it seems like that combo would be a logical next step, because when you look at White House, even Westmoreland, on this matrix, when you look at their, everything's laid out, as far as that minimum active roster ratio, they have the lowest two, so they're the closest to maintaining the staffing, as close to what we would say would be almost appropriate.
Still not quite enough.
But it's still not quite enough. So, and my question to myself was like, well, okay, well, what would that look like if the rest of the VFDs had a similar model? You know, where was it one full-time person, at least one full-time person during the daytime? Is it breaking out to where you have duty crews or scheduled standbys, something that kind of allocates, okay, hey, here's your volunteers, and here's who's up and who's on, and who's kind of like you, I guess you would have paid service maybe, I don't know.
So, first thing, as far as the combination, I guess the first question you gotta ask there is, if you're gonna do the full-time combination aspect, who are those employees of? Are those employees of the nonprofits, or does that become a county entity and they become county employees? I guess that's the first question that would need answered in that regard. But now, as far as the other idea, as far as duty crews and stuff, that was the way it was always done in Montgomery County, is all of our volunteer fire stations had sleeping quarters. And then everybody was assigned a 12-hour shift. When you got on, you chose it based on what worked for your life. You know, I know for mine, it was always, I think, Friday nights from 6 to 6. So we always tried to have people that were dedicated at the station for that 12-hour period, which always allowed us to keep our missed calls lower, but also decrease that amount of time it took to respond to a call. And then everybody else was coming from the house. It was never a requirement, it worked. So I mean, it's an option. I just don't know how you go from where we're at now.
Well, and the biggest thing between doing like the 12-hour shifts and the 24, if you were to try to do 24-hour firefighters at some of these volunteer fire departments, there might be two or three stations of the 14 that could actually have on staff at 20, just because of sleeping quarters and showers. If you look at the new Oak Grove department that was literally just built, it doesn't have a shower. There's certain things, it doesn't have a sleeping quarters. Those costs would be, once again, not saying it doesn't need to happen, because honestly, it does, especially in the long term. But it would be rather costly to add what would need to be done through the volunteer departments. If you're going to do that, you're really going to go to a countywide fire department, unless you wanted to donate the money to them. Because that's really the two different funding models at the end of the day. You've either got a nonprofit donation, where you just give the money to the department, make sure that you can have oversight of their budget, make sure they're spending on what you kind of want them to spend it on, but you don't have hands-on day-to-day operations. The other end of that is you could either start a countywide fire department and to contract with individual fire departments. The contract limits liability to the county, but also you have a greater ability to have oversight of the departments because you're working under a contract. Or you can actually go to a county fire department, in which case you have direct, you have a county fire coordinator, they're underneath the mayor's umbrella, just the same way as EMS is right now. You would have direct control over every penny that is spent, but at that point, you're also in the fire service. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. You're literally the same way you're in medic service right now. So the level of control that you want over the funds really depends on, that's going to relay which funding revenue is really available to you at the end of the day.
So I would submit that can be evolution. It can evolve into that.
Right.
I think that we have a tendency sometimes to think about starting point and end point, and there's many steps in between. One of the ways that you could look at this is that if we wanted to establish some sort of an entity to coordinate the activities of all the volunteer fire departments, call that person the county fire chief or whatever you choose to, you still have that one paid position at least, and then a contract basis with all the volunteers. That person is hired to do that, can take on the role of what we're trying to do here as a group and evaluate the needs of the county and make recommendations to either the HEMS committee or to whatever hierarchy is set up. Maybe he reports directly to the county mayor, I don't know. But if you were to establish that level of coordination, that person can deal directly with the volunteer fire chiefs, get a better feel for what the needs are in different fire departments, and then evolve over a period of time into a higher paid model, which my personal opinion is that that's where we're going to evolve to. Can we do it right now? Probably not. And I think just from a political perspective, I think that would be a tough step to take. But if you had someone at the start, as the first step on this evolutionary ladder, appointed to fill that position and have them evaluate the needs of the county, I think that over a period of time, it will grow. And I think that the way Sumner County is growing and the needs, I think it will grow to the point where we will have some level of paid fire service within the county.
Well, and that's what Chief Farley from Rutherford County said. What they did was, they started in 2008 with the fire coordinator. Around 2010, they started technically the Rutherford County Fire Department. And what they did was, they originally were a shell corporation, like I was describing. But over time, the departments that did not merge with other departments to get themselves to that minimum 4, or the ones that just were not getting a good enough response, over time, Rutherford County took over those fire stations or those fire departments. Pretty much if they had any debt, they would either consume it themselves or that department would cease to exist and disband. And then the county would either take over the building or build a building on the same plot of land that was more updated and had the showers and the sleeping quarters they needed for that particular station. And now Rutherford County is about 6 full-time fire stations, and now there's only 2 volunteer fire departments, where there used to be, say, 9 volunteer departments. Now there's only 2 left, because Rutherford has kind of ate them in as they did not have good enough response. I will say, I do think that would probably take a little bit longer here, Sumner County. I feel like and that was his regret, was he feels like if they had supported the volunteers for longer and earlier, they wouldn't have had to have absorbed those fire stations as quickly, because they would have been able to stand on their 2 feet a little bit longer and kept them away from having to afford those 115 full-time firefighters.
I agree with what you said. Eventually, we're gonna have to have one person as the overseer of this to get it going. But here's my question to you, Mr. Chairman. It's been told to this county commission for years and years that we don't recognize the fire department. I know they've heard it 1,000 times. Are we getting to that point where we're gonna recognize the fire department? Because if we do, then we got a fire department, then we gotta fund it. We've got to fund it. Either way, we gotta get these folks some money regardless, either way. But that's my question to you. All right, is that where we're headed? By listening to what people are saying right now?
So,
Or are we looking to find ways to help what we have now funding?
you know, it's a great question. One that personally I don't have an answer for. That's what this committee is here for, and the intended purpose is we need to flesh that out. And so, as we're just talking, I'm sitting there thinking, like, we'll just go around the horn. I mean, what is the thoughts of this body? And you know, is it stick with the volunteer, or do we start to transition over into more of maybe it's a contract service? And how do you eat the elephant one bite at a time, and not the whole thing at once? You know, so what are those incremental steps that we need to do? You know, so right now we know we have some coverage issues, right? We're just staffing. You know, that's not inclusive of equipment or apparatus or facilities. We've just scratched the surface of staffing.
Right.
And, you know, I think we're having some really good discussion, but I think we're gonna have to make a decision, from a recommendation perspective, as to what direction do we feel like is the best way to go, in making that recommendation for that next evolution. What are those steps we feel like that we need to take? First would be to get here, second would be to get here, third would be to get here. And, you know, here's XYZ underneath step 1, here's what we would do in step 2, here's what we would do in step 3, so on and so forth. I hope that answered your question.
So,
You beat around the bush a lot.
this is where I agree that I think we need
So
to
in
find
short,
out.
I don't know. How's that?
I think we need to find out
That's the
what
important
the
question.
will of the current commission is, what that political body is willing to do, and then which direction we're going. And I agree, once we know which direction we're wanting to go, if we're looking at going to a county fire service as a whole and all of that, as far as those steps, I think that goes back to one of our previous discussions where we look at having CTAS come in and let them kind of start helping guide what are some of those steps. I know we've had discussions about, you know, continuing on and, you know, knowing that, I agree, eventually we're gonna get to the county fire service, it's at some aspect. But if we continue to do capital projects and capital purchases for the departments, well, when you go to disband, Because they're not technically, the way I understood it from the comptroller, is they're not technically nonprofits, they're nonprofit corporations, if you will. So when you go to disband that, the Attorney General's office actually has to be part of that disbanding. But how do we ensure that the county now inherits, if you will, all that equipment? Or do we start looking at going to a county fire service where the county's going that route and start acquiring that equipment while maintaining our volunteers to run those calls? The greatest example that was given to me today, quote was given to me today, was, we're not reinventing a wheel. This wheel's been done several times, so there's ways to do it. It's just a matter of what works for Sumner County and what's the will of the political body.
I think it's fair, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, to say that the trajectory we're on today is not sustainable.
Right.
Are we in agreement there?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll
so-
second that.
Yeah, so we know that the path that we're on today is not one that's sustainable. I think going to a county service is too big of a jump at this point. But I do think that if we can incrementally move that direction, there's a lot more of an appetite for that as opposed to all in one bite, if that makes sense. Yeah, so I think that as far as for this committee, we know that our current trajectory is not one that we want to stay on. So we're going to need to define what is that trajectory, how to correct to get to a trajectory that we know will be sustainable and get us to a point. It's county fire service, but how far down the road would that potentially be? You know, so.
And I guess to clarify, county fire service doesn't necessarily mean paid.
Yeah.
I mean, it just means that the county's funding operational, but the volunteers still, and kind of, I guess you call it a contract. We never, from the firefighter standpoint, it was never a contract for us.
That's the thing now, that is two different things. You've got the countywide fire department as a shell corporation where they're just contracting with the individual fire departments to provide that coverage. And then you have a true countywide fire department to where they actually can control, say, Shackle Island, Highland, and Cottontown were all having staffing issues. Because of the Fire Department Recognition Act, if you do anything besides a nonprofit donation, you will end up filing a resolution through the county commission saying this is who the fire departments are for what areas. And when that happens, then you're giving the zone to particular fire departments, even if that's yourself. So say you were to take on Highland, Shackle Island, Cottontown, you could still have contracts with the 6 other volunteer fire departments, but you could have that fire coordinator, whoever you hire, be pretty much the fire chief, not just of the county's coordination-wise, but also of those 3 station fire districts. So they could just take over those 3 departments, run it, and then they would be able to do mutual aid with the other 6 or automatic aid or whatever. And then as other departments, say, ran into difficulties, you could then have them turn over the same thing, and Sumner County would grow that way. That's the Rutherford County model. That's pretty much how they did it. Now, what he said was they were much worse off as far as personnel at that point in their history compared to what we are right now. Sumner, in some departments, still is pretty blessed with how many they've been able to keep, even in this volunteer shortage everybody's going through. And that's why he said whatever you could do to keep them for as long as you could would be your cheapest route. But for some of the departments, either they're going to have to decide, if you don't have 4 within 10, 12 minutes on a fire call, 80% of the time, ISO-wise, they're not going to count you. So if that happens, you're either going to have to merge or you're going to have to be ready for the county to step in and say, hey, if you can't do this, then we're going to go ahead and start taking over. And that's the route they did. That's the only way. That's kind of either way. You're either going to end up doing a nonprofit donation to a certain dollar amount to where they can afford to either have their own capital expenditures or that they're able to hire some type of paper call or one time, but then you won't have the direct oversight to say, we want you to have 1 full-timer, we expect you to have this many paper call, we expect you to meet up with these certain standards. Because at that point, it's still just a nonprofit donation. You don't have control over what they do with it after the fact. Now, the next year they submit a budget, you can say, hey, you didn't do what we asked you to do, you're not getting funding this year. The funding instead is going to go to this new department we're going to create that's going to cover your zone now. But you can't do that without doing the Fire Department Recognition Act. And honestly, that would be disaster as far as PR wise or anything with the, you'd be wanting the same volunteers to volunteer with the county department that you just bankrupted or put out of service.
And you're looking at a 2-year
So-
wait to add a fire truck to put in there and everything else,
Yeah,
because there's no
yes.
guarantee that
So
nonprofit's
you would
gonna
want,
give you that
if,
equipment.
what Rutherford County did is they coordinated with the fire departments. You know, they gave them every opportunity. When they did hire for those stations, they generally hired from the department that was already there. And they tried to, that coordinator did a very good job of having good relations with those volunteer departments so that it was not like a takeover, it was more of incorporating them into the county service. But if they're not okay with doing it, there can be some gambles.
Gotcha. So, and I've heard from multiple, the fire coordinator, I think we do need a central administration of some sort.
That's the minimum that I hear
Yeah.
from pretty much everyone,
Yeah,
is if
so-
you can at least get that position.
Yeah, I think that,
Then I'm gonna go back to Commissioner Harris's thing. Once you do that, the county is in the fire business.
Exactly.
And so.
And I'm okay with that, as y'all know.
I am too. I mean, please understand me,
Yeah.
but there becomes liabilities and expectations.
You can limit it with the contracts, but you can't make it 100% go away.
Oh, that's legal.
Legal's
Can-
not here.
She's not here.
She's not here. Okay.
She's
They just sit down here. Sorry. Can the county have an MOU with a nonprofit tied to the funding?
No.
No. Okay.
I asked that to CTAS just yesterday. He said that's the big difference. Now, with that being said, there are counties that do it. Robertson County right now has a contract with nonprofits. And also, your EMS department has contracts with each of the volunteer fire departments. So while you say you can't have a contract that directly incorporates fire funding, you can write it up as a nonprofit donation and just require them to do audits and stuff.
You're saying a contract. Is it a contract or an agreement that they would work the first responder calls?
It's a contract.
It's a contract. Well, contracts, to me, when you sign a contract, mean there's money involved. Is there money involved?
There is money involved, but it's wrote up as a nonprofit donation. It's
From
not
EMS?
wrote up as a
From EMS?
general fund.
From EMS?
No.
Well, then
no.
it's not
No,
a.
Robertson County, the way
Okay.
they have it done.
So
is
we're
a
not talking about
contract.
Sumner County.
No, not as
Okay.
far as funds.
I knew we weren't talking about Sumner.
But there is a contract that exists. It's just not with, it doesn't include funding for it.
Can a contract just cover services without compensation involved? Can't I contract with you to provide a service and we agree on some level of compensation where I'm going to build a fence for you and you're going to take my tree down? You know what I mean? Does it have to include?
Well, you do the
The
same
dollar
thing
amount?
with trash service and all kinds of other things. It's just, that's what Robertson County's position on it is semantics. They feel like as long as they don't actually say that it's for, say, the fire calls or whatever they've got in their contract, I'm sure I've already provided it to you at some point. Even though that's CTAS opinion that you can't, they do, and they've operated that way since 2012.
okay.
And I
So,
think the other-
Mr. Chairman, just to put a point on this, because we're getting, is there another committee coming?
We're at,
Oh, we got it? Oh,
we can
okay.
stay here all
Oh, I could
night.
talk a long time.
Yeah.
No, we can't.
Well, we are
Everybody
coming up
says.
on an hour,
Yeah.
so, yeah, let's,
So, to put a finer point on
Yeah.
this, and I think we have a consensus here, at least within, the members tonight, that we need to have some level of coordination and whatever semantically we decide to label that position. But I think that if we make that as a recommendation, that position or that person also needs some funding to support their efforts. And it would seem to me that the minimum recommendation coming from this ad hoc committee could be to appoint someone to coordinate that and identify some of the goals that we would have in mind for this position, but also to come up with some sort of a funding mechanism or some level of funding that person will have responsibility for. And that can be based on on our research of what we think the volunteer departments need now to further enhance their ability to respond. Whether that's putting money aside for capital expenditures in the future, like Curtis was saying, if at some point you wanted to evolve into some sort of a paid on-call service where we have 1 or 2 people in these stations, there's going to be some huge capital expenditures, an outlay just to be able to make that firehouse or that fire station livable for that person for that period of time. Bathroom and kitchen or whatever, I mean, that's what I learned early on. That's the reason we call it a firehouse, is this, you got a crew living there for 24 hours and it's their home. So you've got all the facilities that they would have at a home, other than that they park the fire engine in the garage. So if, at the risk of tumbling further down this rabbit hole, if we were to focus on an endpoint, having a coordinator and then some level of funding to support that coordinator, if we could get to that point in this ad hoc committee, I personally would be happy.
And just to throw the monkey wrench in it, and it's not so much on the funding idea, it's just to make it a point of, is currently we do a nonprofit donation, which just comes out of the general fund that you guys can do. The moment it goes to a county fire service, to where it's a funded thing, then it becomes a matter of how do you fund that, because then it becomes situs-based on the tax revenue. That you can only
It
use
becomes
so
an
much.
obligation.
Yeah.
Well, and,
Right now, it's not an obligation.
and I will say Rutherford County had a rather weird viewpoint of that as well. In the TCA code, it only says that fire services themselves have to be situs-based. It has nothing it does not say anywhere evidently it's rescue. And since 80% of EMS or 80% of fire calls are actually EMS calls, the way they view it and their county attorney views it is that they only worry about having 20% of their county fire budget situs-based. Because it's only 20% that actually runs the fire calls. So I will say that as far as TCA code is concerned, say you have a $2 million fire department budget. If 80% of their fire calls are EMS and car accidents, you're only looking at 1.6 you have to do. You can be through the general fund, only the 400,000 has to be situs-based. So that does throw, that was the first time I heard that today. I ended up calling Mark Alley afterwards. I will say that does make things a lot more affordable.
Okay.
As far as from a legal aspect of situs-based funding.
All right.
And Mark Alley did request that if y'all would invite him to your next month's meeting, he would really like to come and speak, and especially on some of these ways that they can do funding.
Absolutely.
But
Do you have his contact information?
I do. I'd be happy to share it with
If
you.
you would, please, yeah.
He's a great resource.
I think there's also a number of advantages that can be articulated for appointing someone in a coordinating position. First thing came to my mind as I was thinking about this was that I think it might have been Joe was talking about applying for either a SAFER grant or some level of grant funding. I've spoken to so many people now, I'm getting them confused. But the scenario is we've applied for a grant, it's been accepted, we're on the list, and the list is compiled based on call volume. And yes, they accepted our proposal, but by the time they got to us, they'd run out of money because our call volume put us further down the list. Whereas if you coordinate that at a county-wide level and submit it as a Sumner County Fire Department, you've now combined all the call volume for all the stations. Hopefully that betters your position, for funding requests or for grant requests. You also have, in my mind, someone who's coordinating purchases of consumable or replaceable equipment. Well, now you've got more of an economy of scale. Instead of just buying hose here and hose here and hose here, now I take all this request and we go and make one big purchase and hopefully get a better price for it because we're able to provide for a larger so there are some advantages that can be articulated and not just well, we're gonna hire this person and here's what we have to pay them. Coordination and training would be, another thing that the person could help to institute.
You avoid duplication of services as well. Right now, you've got like 95% of the county within 5 mile coverage of a fire station. That's been wonderful compared to other counties. I was just looking at what the pay per call actually would cost in some of these larger departments. Just as I know we're talking about stair stepping, not necessarily going straight from volunteer all the way to full-time, several full-time firefighters per station or anything crazy like that. The most active station was Highland at almost 1,200 calls. In order for them to do pay per call, you're talking about $24,000 a year.
For how many people?
For how many people?
Yeah.
No, I'm talking about just pay per call itself.
But
Per call.
1,200 calls roughly. You said 24?
Yes, they have 1,200 calls in a year. If they do pay per call, say $20 per call, that cost is only $24,000 a year compared to having a paid full-time person just sitting at the hall. As long as they're able to get people to respond with that pay per call, it's a whole lot cheaper to do that than it is to even have, one full-time firefighter.
But that's to get one person per call, correct?
2 people per call.
Not
Oh, no,
$20.
yes, I apologize,
One person.
yes. So it'd actually be 48.
But the question would be, what's more effective? If I'm offering pay per call versus paid on call, which one's gonna be more effective? Same thing that came to mind as we were talking about staffing. You can tell me that you've got 48 people on your roster.
Exactly.
Tell me how many people you can count on to respond.
Yeah. How many are active versus just rostered?
Exactly, and, anecdotally, I've spoken to, a couple of fire chiefs that tell me that, we got 20 people and I'm interviewing a couple more. Well, how many can you count on if a structure fire call comes in tonight? I'm hoping 2, right? So your roster versus participation is gonna differ significantly.
See, now that's the information we need to make.
And I thought we had requested that.
Yeah.
I thought we had as well.
And like the rostered members is great, but to your point, I mean, that's only gonna do a disservice, I think, to our VFDs and whatever numbers we look at, because, hey, it's great you got, 20 on paper, but if you realistically only have a handful that actually are active, and then
Right.
report this number and not the other number.
I know they got 40 at a hotel fire in White House a week ago. Only, 9 of them were the city, the rest of them were all volunteers.
Yeah, but, I mean, let's face it.
It's a hotel fire, yeah.
I was gonna
I
say,
know.
let's face it, you hear a commercial fire, everybody wants to run to it, it's what we do. Now, I will say, there's some technology you can throw to increase your responses, but, I mean, and Chief
Still gotta
Thornton can
pay for
attest to
it.
this, when was it we went to, I Am Responding, remember?
2021.
In 21, yeah, we got an I Am Responding thing to try to boost that, and it did for,
I'm
what,
sorry,
a year or so?
I'm not familiar with that term.
It's an app based so you don't have to have the radio on and hear everything. It only went off for the calls you selected. So, if the only thing I want it to go off for, because I'm not medically trained, is a structure fire, then that's the only thing it would hit on my app for, and then I can turn my radio on and check it around. And it works for a while, and it alleviates some of the issues that you run into of the wife going, hey, shut that thing off, I don't want to listen to it, or the kid's sick, or any of that, so you ain't got all that other stuff going. So it does increase it for a little while. But again, it still goes down to, I'm working, the wife's working, the kid's got this game,
Right.
and it just goes back to the same battle that everybody's fighting, of trying to get people
Cultural
that.
shift that
yeah.
everybody's dealing with, yeah.
Everybody's busy.
Okay. As far as next step, we've agreed that we need coordination. Check. Yeah.
We need more personnel.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and codify that. So as far as from a recommendation standpoint, so we'll entertain a motion to for some level of coordination. We agree that needs to be part of our recommendation.
Would it be a motion for you to take it back to HEMS, for them to take it wherever it needs to go, that needs to be looked at for this budget year if possible, to look at?
No, yeah, we'll soon.
I mean-
I just want to make sure that as we agree on things, let's go ahead and say, okay, yes, we agree.
We need to dump that Tomall at one time.
Yeah.
I would suggest that maybe we model the language that was in the CTAS report. It would be something that you could refer back to as a reference. I have the report with me in what regard.
But no, I think, I guess what the motion you're looking for then is a motion made that this ad hoc committee agrees that we need to go to some form of oversight for everybody, whether it be a county employee or whatever, but we're all in agreement that that's the next step, is that we've got to have some type of administration aspect.
Administrative layer, yes. Yeah.
Especially if you're gonna have the budget. Now, especially if the budget were to stay at the 1.3 that it's at right now, at that level of funding, I think it's irresponsible to not have some type of oversight from the county's behalf to know on a more regular basis where that money's going.
But how do you do that with it being nonprofit donations?
Well, and that's why really, at the end of this committee, you're almost gonna have to send two options. You're gonna have to do it, all right, here's the option if you wanna stay nonprofit donations, and this is the option if we're gonna go, to a more oversight. But I think that's one of the mistakes the last committee made, was they said, hey, here's the way we want it, that's what you should do, and just do it. And when they said no to that, there was nothing else they could pick from.
Right.
And so it just kinda died. So
Well-
if we don't give them one of each option and say, hey, well, at least if you would do this non-profit level, this would get them enough for them to be able to replace the equipment in a timely manner, and to maybe have enough to do the paper call or something of that fashion through the departments themselves, so it still limits the liability from the county. Or if you're gonna do B option, preferably, I'm sure a lot of us would be A, have that oversight layer and then do the contracts, which then gives them the ability to do the capital funding, also gives us more ability to do that oversight aspect and request more things from them, whether it's hydrant testing or ladder training, or we can put better stipulations in that contract where we can have more of a hands-on approach without having 100% of the liability, because you can still delegate that a lot with the contract itself.
Yeah, I agree wholly with that. I think that coming up with two solid options, and then we're gonna present three, because you've got maintain status quo as option three, but, that's.
Can we not send that as an option?
Yeah, well, it's always out there. Have you got that language?
Well, yeah, so CTAS, and this is directly from the report, the recommendation number 2 is the creation of a Sumner County Fire Chief / Administrator.
And I have found very few counties that, even the counties that do 100% volunteer, a lot of them still even have like a unpaid county fire coordinator. You can have a paid unpaid county coordinator without doing more than a nonprofit. You can just select, say, Chris Edgerton or Joe McLaughlin was it in the past. I think my father was the first back in 2008, where at least they sit on the EMS committee or whatever, or the same way that they were doing reports monthly through HMS committee. At least to have that person that is as accountable to the commission, where they can go and ask questions to. You can still do that as a non-paid role, and still have it delegated through the county. It's just once it's a paid position, then you really kind of have to have it as a county-wide fire department, whether that's a shell corporation or not. And they can just be responsible for training. You know, you can just have that as a resource to the volunteer departments. They don't technically have to have any day-to-day operations level oversight. You can just have them to where they come in and help teach the Firefighter 1 classes or the EMR classes, or just as a better resource.
Gotcha. So,
And I understand in a perfect world, that works great. But you're dealing with 9 different entities that have their own boards that have to agree.
That's right.
We're going to fall under this. And if one of them says no, what's the ramification?
Well, with I will say with the Recognition Act, the ramification is that they may no longer be a fire department in Sumner County.
And then.
So you gonna
then-
leave
so
those
the-
folks in that
So then
area?
the county is basically saying, we're not gonna
Yeah.
recognize you as a fire department, and we're not gonna have a fire department in
Well,
that area.
no, that's hence the issue why it's better for them to do a contract than it is to just jump into a countywide fire department. Because you can, as far as the contract, as far as doing the shell corporation, you don't have, the fire departments aren't gonna say no to that, because all it is a contract for them doing exactly what they're doing right now for a set amount of money, as opposed to them having to worry every year about where it's coming from. As far as the contract wise, that's not scary to the volunteer fire departments. Probably if you were to come in and say, hey, well, start listening to us on day-to-day operations, or we're gonna stop giving you funding. Now, that might be a more stern aspect, but that's why Rutherford County started it as a shell corporation with a contract, started to work together with them, and started to build some of that camaraderie before they got to the point to where they just weren't having the responses. And they gladly gave up the stations, because at that time they thought, well, hey, you know, at least my guys will be able to continue to volunteer, they'll be able to get paid per call running the same trucks. And maybe if one day when they go full-time, maybe they'll give us consideration on being the ones to get hired.
And again, I think that's all great ideas. And I would love to see these guys get paid per call. I would. I don't know if the funds are available. At the end of the day, at the beginning of this meeting, before we got there, we're talking about a shortage of dispatchers that we haven't been able to find money for, and now we're gonna find all of this money. And I can tell you from a hiring standpoint, the pool of candidates has gotten smaller over 5 years. And while I totally understand what the Rutherford County chief is saying, use the volunteers as long as you possibly can, but nobody is getting younger. And interview processes I've been involved in the past couple of years, the younger, the newer generation that is entering the workforce is worried about their family time and their quality time. And so, again, when you go to say, we're gonna do this training, and we're gonna do hydrants, and we're gonna do this, and they go, no, I'm not. What do you do? We have roster numbers here that I mean, I can tell you from personal experience, I'm looking at the roster numbers, and I can tell you on some of these departments, I see the same 6 to 7 people, and they're not getting younger, and it's getting harder to do the job. At the end of the day, we gotta come up with some things, but these two have a vote when it comes up, but you gotta get at least 13 commissioners that agree with this. We can come up with all the recommendations, but at the end of the day, that's all we can do is make a recommendation. To the chairman's point, I think we gotta start with, okay, how do you get a paper call? I think there needs to be oversight, but I'm gonna go ahead and tell you, it's gonna be hard to get all 9 of these to say, yes.
You're right.
I'm the chief of this department, but I will now be under this person. That's gonna be a stretch.
Yep.
Well, wouldn't that mean that contracts are the best way to go for right now, as far as getting them to go in line? Because with the contracts, it's still not in the day-to-day operation. Once you go to a county-wide and actually have that person directly over them, that's where those issues would take place. If we're trying to stair-step the situation, I feel like that's the next logical, is to either increase the nonprofit or do the contracts.
Do you have a copy of Robertson County's contract?
Yes, we've turned it in, actually. We got one from Robertson that I sent you, and the one from CTAS itself we sent you.
Because again, a contract, you will do this for this compensation, but if you don't, here are the ramifications. And
Yeah, I think in that it
again,
says
that's
it can
fine
pull the
line.
funding. I think they said it can cancel the contract within 30 days at any time, or they can just not fund it at the next budget cycle, and it also cancels the contract. So there is control of the purse string still in that contract.
But the county, I mean, if the county goes and cancels a contract again, now you've got an entire district that doesn't have fire service, so does the county really have that ramification? Because you can't do it. I mean, you can't say, well, we're not gonna fund this one, so now you don't have anything.
Right, but I guess where I'm coming from is, what other options do we have? We can either go straight to a county-wide full-time fire department that we're not gonna get through this commission. I would love to see that happen, would absolutely love to see that happen, but it's not realistic. We're talking about, how much does EMS cost us in a year? And they don't even wanna do 10% of that for the fire departments. How are they gonna go to 4 to 5 million a year minimum? If they were to do 24, 48 shifts, not only are you having to pay for the personnel, you're having to replace probably 11 of the 14 fire stations, if they wanted to keep the same number of fire stations. If not, you'd have 1 or 2 fire stations doing the entire county. And even on 2 people on shift for 24/48, that's 6 full-time people. Still only running out of 2 stations at that cost. Having to replace those buildings just to get showers and day room quarters and,
Just have a commode in them.
yeah, I mean, just number one, they don't even have running
No,
water.
got an outhouse out
So I'm trying to be realistic about the situation and just say, well, hey, we could either do nonprofit, we could do a contract, or we could do full-time. Full-time we could do, but that's gonna be rather expensive. I just don't see it getting through the commission, I don't. And I don't know what funding source you would have to do it, other than for the next couple of years, the increase that you get from the extra property taxes all goes towards fire department, to do that in a short span of time. You're talking, Rutherford County has a $13-14 million budget. It's just not doable here yet. So for me, really, the only way you could do it is to have the coordinator, yes, but if you do it as a contract, it's not really anything the departments are saying no to. In fact, if I remember correctly, I've been in a chiefs meeting where they already voted to be fine with contracts. They sent it through the Ad-Hoc committee that way. That's how they all voted for the contract we sent to the committee. So I know they would say yes to that. Now, whether they would just say, well, hey, yes, I'll be under this person's umbrella. But again, if you say they've got Cottontown and they're only getting 3 guys to every structure fire, do they have a fire department? You know what I mean? At a certain point, if they don't have that 4 minimum just to at least get the ISO rating below a 10, then you're really not doing on the financial side what we need you to do, and either combine with somebody else or let us take it. Or I don't know what else you can do at that point. You've got to do something.
So back to the coordinator.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
I really think we're
I thought we were
talking
in
about
agreement, but
the
maybe.
coordinator's role would be to take those administrative steps and build those relationships, to hopefully evolve into the structure that we would envision. And yes, I think that there will be a tremendous number of roadblocks and impediments, and I do not want that job, but I think it's an important position, and I think that that's the direction we've got to go.
He can do all this.
So, is there a motion to incorporate a coordinator into the recommendation that we are developing?
Motion.
Second.
Okay. Now, we've had a lot of discussion over that.
I think before we do that, you're gonna need some more information on what you're calling coordinator.
I think Mark Alley would be a wonderful person to ask that question to.
Okay, so we're already decided that we're gonna bring him back next month, correct?
I would like to.
Yeah.
If I need to make that a motion, I'll be happy to.
That's the CTAS guy, correct?
Yeah, no, is he CTAS?
Mark Alley is
Yeah.
CTAS rep.
Okay. Yeah.
He specifically does, he's one of the ones that did the CTAS report. He's a breadth of knowledge on this stuff.
Okay.
And that's all he does is go to the different counties and answer questions on what they legally can and can't do, how they can and can't start a fire department. And if you're wanting these questions directly from the source, that's the best way to do it. Just let him come up here and answer, listen to us.
All right, so we got a motion and a second to include a coordinator to some degree in our recommendation. So, any other discussion before we vote? No? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so good, we've got that done. All right, so as far as next steps and next meeting, do we still need to focus and continue to talk about staffing? I don't think we got any resolution on that. We really didn't have the information I feel like we needed. It was kind of some.
We really need the numbers from the
Okay.
departments.
Yeah, because trying to do a best guesstimation and directional is still, we need some hard numbers. So we'll continue to have it as a focus then for next month, is staffing. So
Is that a fair question to pose the individual fire chiefs? What's your roster number? What do you realistically expect to respond? Is that?
I think it's one of the things we asked at the first meeting, is what's your roster and what's active? And
Was that how?
their ability to 10 and 10, 6 and 14.
Right.
If they'll just show us how many people we got showing up to
Mhm.
fires and what's the time frame, that'll answer most of our
That
questions.
information is on the ISO reports, but a lot of those ISO reports were 2021, 2022, so it's gonna be outdated information. I'd rather have it fresh in the departments.
Okay.
But if we're not getting a
Motion to
quick enough
formally
response
invite
within
all
the
the current
departments.
volunteer chiefs to the next meeting, since we're gonna have the CTAS guy here.
That's a good idea.
You wanna make that motion?
What's that?
Make a motion to formally invite all the volunteer fire chiefs to the next meeting. Since we're gonna have the CTAS rep here and we're talking about where we're going from here, it'd be nice to see at least the majority, if not all of them, sitting in the audience to where if we need to, we can suspend the rules and, get that info.
I'd be happy to send out a specific invitation.
There's got a motion, is there a second on that?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion on that? No. Okay. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Next meeting is February 10th.
We do have a quorum, don't
Yeah.
Yes,
we?
yes.
Oh, okay, good.
I think,
Should have asked that earlier, huh?
Okay. I'll work with Chief Edgerton to get that done, because I think it'd be appropriate for myself or even Commissioner Rogers to extend that invitation, so I'll be happy to do that. So we'll get that done, but just get that contact. If you got contact information you can share, please.
yeah,
please
they've got an
do.
email.
Okay, yeah, that would be great. So, all right, I think that is it, unless somebody else has anything else that we want to discuss, as far as, from a staffing perspective, to tie anything else off for this month's meeting.
So for next month's meeting, the agenda is what, just continuing discussion on staffing
We're
and
gonna
the
do this-
CTAS
yeah.
presentation?
Can we add equipment or something, that way we can, I feel like we would've got through this conversation quicker if we'd had another subject to move to sometimes.
I don't want to jump to equipment, because I think staffing, you gotta have the people before
Yeah,
you know.
you
how
know, the
much-
people, it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
True,
so
which-
we'll get there. It's like, I don't want to go and overlook it and just kind of glaze over staffing before we move to
Are
equipment.
we sure that the CTAS rep is available?
We'll coordinate,
yeah.
we'll coordinate a time.
He,
and then-
he requested, he was pretty adamant that I asked y'all to allow him to come.
Okay.
Okay,
Hey, Mr. Wayne.
Yes, sir.
Can I get 1 second of your time in the meeting?
in the meeting?
If you don't mind.
Yep.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
There's a
Second.
motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, any opposed? Nope.
I'll bring one thing to your attention, well, a couple of things real quick, just before y'all leave out, a little thing to think about. When Mark Alley comes in the CTAS report, I've talked to him multiple times over multiple years. The first question he asked me and Chief McLaughlin over here, last time we saw him in person, first question he'll ask every fire chief in the room: how many people do you have at 7 a.m.? How many people do you have at 7 p.m.? If you have less than 4, he's going to say you're not a fire department. When you're asking about staffing levels, pay-per-call is wonderful. I am probably, in Millersville, the biggest pay-per-call department in the county left, because you're not full-time. I'm a combination. I have one full-timer during the day, works 12 hours, 7 days a week, and then everything else is paid per call. I have a roster of 18 people that I pull from. So a lot of my members don't live inside of my city limits. I only have 3 technically who live inside the city of Millersville, and I have 3 who live in White House, it's next door, 1 in Madison. Everybody else is Hendersonville, Gallatin, and whoever. So, and that's just because Millersville, besides being politically climate right now, is they've burned through all their volunteers. The population is 6,000 people. At some point, you just run through the people that's gonna volunteer and you're done. Of those 18 people, when I have responding, anything past 6 o'clock in the afternoon, there's usually 2 or 3 of us that respond to a pay per call incident, unless it's a major fire, and then you will get some that roll in slowly, but it takes a bit. So pay per call is definitely, and I worked for 51 when they did on staffing and pay per call. Yes, it helps some, but I can tell you for a fact, during pay per call with 50 people on the roster, which that 50 is split between Robertson and Sumner County and some other things, so that number is slightly inflated. There was myself, Joe Williams, and Skylar Payne that responded to 90% of your night calls, unless it was a major fire. So that's not, pay per call is not going to help your staffing levels, but for a small increase and in certain little bubbles. Also, just to let you know, if you want to know about structure fire numbers, currently right now on Tyree Springs, there is a structure fire on Bugsby Hollow with one house and possibly 2 to 3 cars involved. Everybody seems to be out. I don't think anybody's in danger. Just counted that's en route to that. There's 4 tankers, 3 or 4 engines, 2 ambulances. And there's a large response because it's a large fire. But to get the numbers it's going to take to fight this fire, they're calling White House Community, City of White House, Gallatin Community, Hendersonville, not Hendersonville, Shackle Island, Gallatin Community, and Cottontown, and Highland, they're the other one. So it takes 6 or 7 departments to fight this thing because of the mutual aid system. But I digress. I'm just saying, if the paper call is a great way to go, but like I think somebody said, small bites of the elephant. You're gonna have to slowly increase how you wanna fix this problem. And I'll shut up for this one.
What do you feel like is the next logical step from here if we're gonna move towards a full-time?
The coordinator. That's 100% the right way. Get somebody who can get the fire. I'll tell you the second thing, and you're doing it next month, is getting the fire chiefs in the room. Because having these discussions are great around the table, but unless you ask the men who are doing it and actually trying to combine their people, you'll never get any other answers. This table needs to be twice as big, with twice as many people sitting around it, to be honest with you.
Anything else for me?
I'm good. Now, y'all, it's adjourned.
All right, so back in session, one last thing.
Let me do a job.
All right, second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thanks, guys.
Sorry for my tardiness there.
Mercy,
No, it bugs me.
I tell you what.